What's up, Fantasy Champions? Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to thrivefantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network.
Do you like the Oakland A's? Are you a fan of the Golden Knights? Do you love the Los Angeles Chargers? Well then, my friend, you're in the right place. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show with your host, Jake the Snake SIlva, brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network.
Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another great week on a Monday night. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening tonight, we're live on all social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And go like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell button for all latest notifications, and even go watch future and past shows as well. We really do appreciate your guys' love and support for the network as well. And, of course, for those of you who missed out on the giveaway, we did have a bunch of at least two winners from the giveaway. So if you guys missed out on that, no worries, because on the 4th of this month of February, and we know love is all in the air, right? It's that time of year in February. Valentine's Day is coming up. Why don't you get your special someone the gift that keeps on giving? From right at the 4th through the 7th of February. When you go online to the spotlightsportsgear.com, use, when you purchase every single one of your gears, t-shirts, hats, hoodies, so much more, you'll get 20% off your discount. 20%. I mean, that's a hell of a deal. You guys will get huge amounts off of your purchases. So definitely go online to the spotlightsportsnetwork.com and shop for your merchandise. And that's on all shows. That's for the network. That's all over. 20% off of all of your purchases. I'm so glad to be here with all of you guys here tonight. What's going on, Ryan Gage? What's going on, Luke? Really do appreciate every single one of you guys here being here tonight, because there is a lot to really talk about. And I mean, I'm fresh from a great weekend in Utah. I thought it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. Oh man. You know, there's something about nature that just calms your soul, calms your mind. And it's just, there's an essence behind it. I loved every bit of it. Great weekend. You know, it was great weather. I mean, it was probably its lowest was right in the 20s, but once it started to heat up, it was beautiful. It was beautiful all through and through. I had such a great time. And so here I am back on a weekend, on a Monday, getting started for the new week. And we got a lot to talk about. So let me start off with this, because over the weekend, I couldn't help, but of course, you know, sometimes when I'm up on vacations, there's times where I'll get notifications and I'll just automatically go, wow, that just happened, you know, and it's everything. Isn't it crazy how much that we get the notifications on our phones, and it comes to like big time news? It's incredible. But the one news this past weekend that really caught my attention, that everybody was like, oh, Jake, what's your thoughts about this? This is crazy. Well, it's happening in the West Coast, and that's happening in Los Angeles with the LA Rams. And it was crazy enough how this weekend ended up coming up. But it has been confirmed Matthew Stafford is being traded from the Detroit Lions for 2 first-round picks and Jared Goff. Let me start out by saying this, because a lot of you have seen my past episodes where I had tried to defend Jared Goff, and in the end, Goff is traded away. Why? Why would Goff be traded? Why would that be the case? Well, remember, Los Angeles, it's a big market. It's a money market deal in the West Coast. That's why a lot of these superstars all come out west. LeBron came out west. Kawhi Leonard came out. He went to the Clippers. There were a bunch of players that were all from the East Coast that they all decided to come out to the West. Now the East is starting to kind of build itself, so it's starting to look a little bit balanced. But overall, there are a lot of players that they're coming into the West Coast. And one of them being in particular is Matt Stafford. And Matt Stafford, who spent 12 long years with the Detroit Lions, number 1 overall pick years ago. And this is a happy day for Matt Stafford. This is the happiest he's ever been in his career at 32 and going into 33 that he's getting an opportunity like this. Now, why would the Rams deal away Goff? Well, here's the thing. Because the Rams were fresh off from Jeff Fisher, and they go and get this young kid, very innovative, big on offense, and he gets probably one of the best personnels in Sean McVay. And Stan Kroenke and Les Snead, owner and general manager of the Rams, they only have one thing. They want to push for a championship. They want to push to be the best team out there in the NFC West and all of the NFC and get back to the Super Bowl. That's one of my biggest things that I believe is one of the reasons why the Rams were very aggressive. And I think that's what attracted Matthew Stafford, an organization that's aggressive, an organization that wants to win a championship. They want to get into it. And the question of it is because was there a lot of limitations with Jared Goff? Is that why? Well, let me just tell you this. There were some interesting takeaways, and I mentioned this before. When Jared Goff has a healthy offensive line, when he does, he's probably a winning quarterback, and he's comfortable. But when he is sacked more than once, not so great. But even so, Jared Goff, unlike some of these young quarterbacks that we see in the league, he's only 25 years old. Look at some of these quarterbacks around the league. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, all of them can run out of the pocket at any time when danger comes. And by the way, there were close enough games. I mean, Goff was able to beat Seattle in the playoffs with a broken thumb. They managed to win it. They almost managed to upset Green Bay. But because of the offensive line for Green Bay stopping Aaron Donald in his tracks and the rest of his cohorts, it wasn't working. It wasn't working. And you have to think, well, didn't Goff get to a Super Bowl? Well, yes, they did. But even so, that Super Bowl was the lowest scoring Super Bowl we've ever seen, 13-3. They had probably one of the best defenses. They had a long list of really good players. Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. And Kupp was out for the rest of the year. If they had him, it probably would have been interesting stories. But even so, it's crazy. It's crazy how all of this just kind of flows through. But the one reason why that the Rams decided to move off of Goff, there was one game in particular. No, it wasn't the game against the Jets. No, it wasn't the game against Miami. But it was more importantly against Kyle Shanahan. Another young offensive coordinated mind as a head coach. And he's got Jimmy G, but Jimmy G was hurt. And then you had CJ Beathard, but he wasn't the starting quarterback. Instead, it was Nick Mullins. In that game, Jared Goff threw for 2 turnovers and a fumble. There was some signs of inconsistency with Jared Goff. That was what people started to recognize. They started to recognize some of the turnovers. They started to recognize his judgment call as a quarterback. And then not to mention not having any ball security, nothing. So in the end, Jared Goff and Sean McVay, that relationship didn't work out. That was when Sean got on the phone. And the first call he made was to Stan Kroenke. Said, Stan, you and Les, we need to sit down and talk. And that was when it was the serious question. Do you believe in me? Because all of this is all about McVay. The smart, young head coach who wins. And at the same time, I mean, he's a play developer. But just didn't have the right quarterback in the helm. Now he does with Matthew Stafford. But here's the other part that you got to take away, because I'm going to be talking about Detroit here in a second. But my thing is, with this Jared Goff thing, is because Matthew Stafford, a number 1 overall pick out of Georgia, goes to Detroit, one of the most ran down organizations in the NFL. And everybody was ranting and raving. Stafford got talent. He's got the arm strength. He can move out of the pocket. He can do all this and that. And what was unfortunate about Detroit, they had one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen in this league in Calvin Johnson. And he had a name for himself as Megatron. It was one of his favorite receivers until Detroit couldn't really get the job done. They make it into the playoffs, but couldn't win playoff series. And it wasn't the same since Jim Caldwell left. It's unfortunate for Detroit. And Detroit fans, they have been begging for a winning season. And it never happened. Instead, it ran down the careers of Stafford, it ran down the careers of Calvin Johnson, and it ran down the careers of Barry Sanders. And it hasn't gotten better since then. So if you were Detroit, they did the right thing. Matt is only 33 years old. And if you're the Rams, you got to be happy about this, because you're going to get at least 5 years out of Stafford at best. Until then, because you're not going to get a first-round pick until 2024. After you traded away 2 first-round picks, you trade away Jared Goff, and so by 2024, hopefully beyond then, you might get a first-round pick and then eventually use it on a quarterback, at least the next up-and-coming talent. But at this point right now, because think about it, Los Angeles is such a money-hungry market. That's just the way it is. The Lakers, they spent big money to go in and get in LeBron, and LeBron said, I want Anthony Davis here, and it was a perfect match. It was a perfect match made in harmony. And they won a championship. They might be going for championship number 2 in a row. The Dodgers always seem to be in the postseason. They've been in the World Series twice, but could never get the job done. Instead, we got to get that kid Mookie Betts, because right now, Boston made the biggest mistake out of all of them. And that's how the Dodgers land Mookie Betts, and they go and win the World Series. The Chargers, they got Justin Herbert, who not a lot of people thought he would be playing this crazy out of his mind on a rookie season. But there were a lot of high hopes about Herbert, and there's a lot of high hopes about Brandon Staley. And the Chargers are making some serious moves. So if you're the Rams today, you got to make this thing work. That's all Sean McVay is trying to do. They're trying to make this thing work. In an LA market where it is hungry, you are either the best or nobody's going to watch you. Nobody's going to watch you. That's it. That's all that's going to happen. So if they don't make this thing work with Matthew Stafford, the Rams, unfortunately, that team is boring in Los Angeles. That's how it is. Listen, you got celebrities that live in Los Angeles. Okay? The one thing they want to watch, they want to watch some of those big-time James Cameron movies, or maybe Steven Spielberg, or the ones that really catch your attention, that had the theatrics, and they've got the best actors and actresses. in the business. They don't want a movie that's a complete dud. It's good, but then eventually it just becomes boring. It runs off. That's what the Rams had to do. They almost felt like they were going to be a team that, yeah, they got Aaron Donald. Yeah, they got Jalen Ramsey. But then you got Jared Goff, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. So that's it. So if you're the Rams today, you got to be happy about this. But for Sean McVay and for Les Snead and for Stan Kroenke, I mean, that's how the LA market was. 9 draft picks altogether. 9 of them. All gone. And they won't have one until 2024. And that is it. So they got to make this thing work with Matthew Stafford. But for Stafford, prove us wrong. We've been hearing about this talent stuff for years. There are no excuses. You have a run game, you have an offensive line, you have weapons, and you got a defense. So make this thing work. Otherwise, this will be a complete dud in the works. And you lost the draft picks on that. All right, let's shift to, for Detroit's side of this, because now they're getting Jared Goff, and we don't know. Maybe this could be an uprising for Jared Goff. He's no longer in California. He goes into a hardworking city in Detroit. It's hard living, and that's just how it is. So it'll be interesting. But ultimately, what the Lions are going to get, they're going to get first-round picks. They're going to get first-round picks. But what's interesting about this, you see a lot of these teams in the NFL that every year, it always seems to be the same sob stories. You see the Lions, you see the Jets, you see the Jaguars, you see a lot, Houston, a bunch of these teams always seem to be in the draft, that always seem to be at the top 10s. Why is that? Sometimes that always starts with your ownership. Because it's ownership, it's general managing, it's head coach, and then it's quarterback, and then it's offensive line. That's the tiers. So the ownerships, the Ford family, when it comes to the Detroit Lions, they don't even know how to even make this team work. That's why some people are either pushing for sell the damn team. And I can tell you, it's interesting to see how Detroit could be. Because listen, the Detroit Tigers, they've won a World Series before. They're an interesting team. As long as Miguel Cabrera is still there on the Tigers are going to be interesting. But they won't be as finesse and dynamic. That's just how it is. Look at the Detroit Red Wings. Dylan Larkin. And it's unfortunate with Henrik Zetterberg because of the fact of he lost to an injury. Detroit, I remember watching a documentary about some of the Russian players who were big-time players that played with Steve Yzerman, and Detroit was dynamic. They were interesting. They were fun to watch. It's a great documentary, too, because it ended up talking about these players and it ended up talking about their homeland in Russia. It's a great documentary. Check it out. But Detroit at that point, they had some interesting players. They won a Stanley Cup not too long ago, and then eventually things just hit rock bottom. Now they're trying to build themselves back up, and I don't know how long that process will be, but they do have a starting piece in Dylan Larkin. That's all they have right now until they make this thing work. Then you've got the Detroit Pistons. Okay, the Pistons were not as dynamic since Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Bad Boys. That was the only time. Then eventually, it got all the way down to Ben Wallace, to Chauncey Billups, to Rip Hamilton. And after that finals, they just became irrelevant again. So when you look at the Detroit Lions, they've always been irrelevant. They've never been to a Super Bowl. Hell, I don't even remember the last time they even won a playoff game. It's bad. This is why this needs to be a different setting. This needs to be a different setting for the Detroit Lions. And when I looked at Dan Campbell and his interview, good God, I'm not looking for a wrestling type of interview. I'm looking for a grown-up, a guy who sees the problem, who knows that this is a dysfunctional organization, one that needs a lot of work. It's a mess. It's crazy. But hopefully Detroit makes this right, because with all these first-round picks and with all of this, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for quite a while. So, going to be taking at least a little bit of a short break from here. But when we come back, one of my good special guests here up on the show, Jeremy Case, is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking a lot about hockey because you know what? I'm excited that hockey has been back, but there are a few complications we want to end up talking about. And of course, latest news that's buzzing right now in hockey. So you guys do not want to end up missing that. Going to be taking a small break, and we will be back shortly on the Snake Sports Talk Show.
But I know that's just in my mind. I know everything is just in my mind. Do you really want to be famous? Do you really want to be a superstar? Do you really want to get dangerous? Do you even know where the groupies are? Bitches out here be...
Welcome to Hammer's House.
So, folks, of course, there are a couple of shows here on the Spotlight Sports Network that you can definitely check out. Well, one of them is, if you guys loved Royal Rumble this past weekend, which I sure as hell did, I loved the fact that Edge is going to be in WrestleMania, and I'm hoping he gets that gig against Roman Reigns. I think that would be a great match. Not to mention Bianca Belair against Asuka. Royal Rumble was great. Royal Rumble was great last weekend. If you guys didn't end up catching that live stream, but you guys are diehard wrestling fans, definitely check out Malguli, aka Malcolm Bean, in the Ghoulie Zone here on the Spotlight Sports Network. If you guys are diehard Jet fans and you guys love the rumor buzzes and so much more, definitely check out Gangrene David here on the network as well. And finally, since baseball is going to be around the corner, if you guys are diehard Met fans and you guys are also diehard Raider fans, definitely check out the one house you go to for all the great content and entertainment at Hammer's House here on the Spotlight Sports Network. So, you know, the hockey season's been very interesting. And I mean, it's one that it's a little bit shortened, and there are a bunch of competitive teams. We've got different divisions, but it's been kind of odd. It's been kind of odd all through and through. But I just seriously think that there are this is kind of one that, like, I watched every single one of these players. I watched all these moves, everything. And there are a bunch of teams that are on my mind that I think are competitive, can be competitive, and some, like I said about Detroit, they're going to be they're going to be rebuilding. But it's going to be interesting. But I do have one special guest up on here that's going to help me out to really kind of seeing how this hockey season has really been panning out. So joining me here now on the Spotlight Sports Network via the Global Satellite Network, presented by StreamYard, Jeremy Case here. So, Jeremy, it's good meeting you, man, and it's good seeing you. You know, you and I, we've been watching this hockey season, and so far it's been filled of just, thank God hockey's back, and we've had a lot of really good stuff so far. But then there's some oddities that's been happening through the season. Number one, a couple of teams postponing. What has been your thoughts about this hockey season so far?
Well, I mean, certainly it hasn't really been as affected as its counterpart, NBA or the NFL. I mean, there's been a couple hiccups here and there with the hockey COVID protocols, couple stammers here and there, but hasn't really been anything really too major as far as it's gone. I mean, we've had obviously the teams that most of America is having trouble with down in Florida and Dallas, they're having issues with it. so Tampa Bay a little bit, and then the big one obviously was Washington, them going through their whole debacle with teammates being in the rooms without no masks on. It's kind of hard for I think for any athlete in any sport right now. I mean, you're asking players to be locked up in a room 24/7 before a game, and it's definitely difficult. It's almost I guess I want to say, like, against all human nature to do that to any human being at all, is to just say, hey, stay isolated for about, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours a day, and then you can come out and see your friends. It's kind of hard in that aspect, and the NHL has been all the NHL players are kind of on par with that. They kind of just they're having difficulties with it as well, but it definitely hasn't been affected as much as any of the other sports so far.
Right. And it's kind of interesting, Jeremy, because we were coming off of a year where, for one, I mean, I thought the year was going by smoothly, and it was very interesting because we knew exactly who our competitive teams were. We knew some teams that were going to be rebuilding. Then, of course, the COVID pandemic hits, and it stops everything. It stops everything. We didn't even know exactly when hockey was going to make a comeback. We weren't sure if the Stanley Cup playoffs was going to even start. And then finally, we had the plans from Commissioner Gary Bettman, where no, hockey's going to be coming back. We're bringing the Stanley Cup playoffs back, but it was going to be in a different playoff format. And I thought it was great. I thought it worked out perfectly, where they had two neutral sites from Edmonton to Toronto, and then worked it all the way down to where we got a Stanley Cup champion in the end of it. And now here we are at this point, and I totally agree, because the fact of locking some of these players in their rooms, quarantining until they're ready to come back up onto the ice. These are some of the difficult challenges that, even for not just hockey, but even for other sports as well, that they've been trying to, get through these obstacles, find ways to really, keep players healthy, keep them out on the field and the ice. And it's been kind of a rough challenge, but it's not a challenge that anybody's backing away from. They're trying to find new innovative ideas. So my thing of this is, because now with it shortened up, has it kind of pushed a lot of teams, maybe even some that are like kind of the more mid-tier, the ones that are kind of middle of the pack, has that kind of pushed some motivation for them to be working better and maybe potentially becoming an interesting team to make the playoffs?
Well, I mean, you can kind of see that as well, and it's also a little bit difficult as well with the emergence of now you can have 3 goaltenders, and now you have a taxi squad that you can pick and pull from. Injuries are starting to rear their ugly head now with teams, because there was 10 days of training camp, there was no preseason. It's starting to catch up with most of the teams. So I mean, there are some teams that you really didn't expect to make a big splash that are right now. Those being Montreal right now, they're making huge strides. I mean, they do have a lot of talent, but nobody saw them coming out. And then Florida has a decent team as well, if they can just kind of stay within those COVID protocols. And it's been kind of a sticky situation with them down there with their arena, kind of been canceling events. It's not necessarily all COVID, but and Dallas got off to a hot start, but they got, now you're seeing with all these COVID protocols as well, is a lot of teams have to make up a lot of ground in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
The Stars in particular, they got to play, like, I think it's like something like they got to play like 58 games in 105 days. It's going to get rough, and I'm not so sure that the Stars even make it back to the playoffs this year. I mean, that's a lot of grinding and just the dog days of the mid-season. Granted it's only 65 games and not 82, but
sure,
that also goes to my other point on the other way. Like, most of these teams, you don't have that 30 game cushion like you usually do anymore. There's not that 30 or so game cushion. It's 65, not 82 games, and teams, and especially now we're kind of seeing a sort of type of baseball format as well. There's back-to-backs, there's 3-4 in a row. You're kind of seeing teams face each other 4 times. I mean, in the North Division, the Scotiabank Division, you got every team's going to face each other 10 times because they're all kind of locked up there in Canada. So I mean, it's definitely, it's so hard to put your thumb on anything right now.
Yeah, not to mention too, some of these teams that they're not used to some of them that are outside of those divisions either, and they'll never get a chance to face them unless they're in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and that's about it. So I can kind of see where the challenge is really going to be met from there. Because, I mean, I live here in Las Vegas, and we've got the Vegas Golden Knights that they've been out. They had the postponement because of the fact of COVID protocols, and now I got the news they ain't going to be playing until Friday against the LA Kings. So now those 2 games against San Jose are basically done. They're postponed, and now they got to they got to figure out a way really to bounce back. The coaching staff will be there. That's a good thing. But now you just kind of have to pick the pieces up a little bit, and now you got to find some way to get yourselves motivated and get going.
Absolutely. And Vegas is one of those difficult hot spots as well. I mean, it's not exactly all closed down on the strip right there. And guys, teams coming in and out, not necessarily, wanting to stay around or stick around. And there's a little bit more leeway out in those cities than there is in other cities. And it's definitely weird. And the other thing too is the playoff structure this year. There is no conferences. There's just divisions. So more than likely you can have 2 teams that would be ideally in the same conference facing each other in the Stanley Cup Finals. You could have 2 teams from the Western Conference or that were in the Western Conference, or you could have 2 teams that were in the Eastern Conference face each other in the Stanley Cup Finals this year.
Yeah, isn't that some type of oddity right there? Because usually it would be East or West, and I've never seen that before in my life. I think that would be probably one of the most strangest things that could happen. But I just think even so, it'll be very interesting to see how this all pans out until we get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I agree with you with that, with especially the timetables and the cushions, because the players I think of are the goaltenders and defensemen, because these guys, I mean, and a lot of these other players as well, they get hit every time. You think about the goaltenders having to block every single shot left and right, and it stings. I mean, you're sore. You're sore from the neck down. So, when you think about the timetable, it's like, are they really going to have enough rest time to get back up, get the pads back on, continuing to play solid, and push for a championship? I mean, that's a difficult task if you ask me.
Absolutely. And you can see it right now when it's kind of rearing its head as well. A lot of D lines, a lot of back ends are not really showing up that well. That's why there's all these high scoring games. It's crazy to try and hit it over under anymore now, because there's anywhere between 6 to 10 goals a game. Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of games right now in the early going being pushed to overtime, being pushed to shootouts. There's hardly any games decided in regulation right now. So I think, honestly, we're going to see a lot of these teams' identities about 4 to 6 weeks from now, when we kind of get really into the thick of it. A lot of, my message to a lot of fans is just, let's everybody just calm down. It's early. Don't panic about your team just yet, even if they are doing horrible. Don't hit the panic button. Don't necessarily get too excited either. I mean, you saw the Colorado Avalanche, you get out to a really hot start, and now we can only dress, I think it was only 11 skaters tomorrow night. Half the team's injured. McKinnon's out, Sod's out, Taves is out. Like we're dealing with a lot of injuries right now. And so it's just kind of, luckily now than last year when we had them happen in the second round of the playoffs, and it definitely came back to bite us against Dallas, and we ultimately ended up losing to them. But it's just like, my point stands. Don't get too excited. Don't get too down on your team just yet. It's 4 to 6 weeks. Let's just give it time. Let's have patience. Let's give it let's not have the microwave society we kind of currently live in. Let's kind of wait things out. I said before, 65 not 82. That's kind of the key thing for teams to remember this year. you don't, like I said, you don't have that cushion. You gotta figure things out a little bit quicker than you usually would, because it's gonna go fast, especially with this 3-4 games in a row, and you only have you might play 4 games in 5 days. So
Right.
that goes fast. That goes quick, and you may your team may, you know, I don't know, they may treat it like baseball doubleheaders and give all the effort the first game and not so much the second game, but it's gonna it's gonna kind of rear its ugly head at some point. And now we're seeing you're gonna see more of the true importance of how beneficial it could be just to take a game to overtime, not to necessarily win it, but just to take it and get that 1 point. It's probably going to make a difference between those third and fourth spots and some of those divisions there.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Because you think about it, pushing those games into overtime, the much needed important points. Because you know what, it's better to come away with a point than to come away with nothing. And I agree with you. I think that you're going to see an absolute difference of it. That's why, to me, like I mean, listen, I've already put an asterisk on college football. It was a dud. It was an absolute dud, because if it had not been for the pandemic, we would not be talking about certain teams like Coastal Carolina or Cincinnati or some of these other programs. We wouldn't do that, because we know who our Power 5 conference are. We know exactly who our tough programs are in the nation. And this would not happen. It's kind of the similar situation when it comes to hockey, because of the fact of, and I would ask too, this has to be beneficial in some ways for the goaltenders, because the amount of guys they have. I mean, I think of it this way with the Golden Knights, because I have been saying this to Vegas fans everywhere. There's no differences when you look at it from Fleury and from Leonard's standpoint. They're both solid starters. One of them, of course, is going to have a bad night, and the other one's going to pick him up. But if you think about it like a baseball rotation, if your first 2 starters are not solid, then you have the back end of the rotation for a reason, because it's to help to reshape, refocus, and recover, so that by that next start, they can come out and they'll be a completely different player. And I feel like with this, with having the amount of goaltenders that they have, maybe it even would bring up an up-and-coming guy that might get a few reps here and there. But I would have to say it's kind of beneficial in a way for the goaltenders, because it's going to give each of them some much-needed rest if possible.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see a lot of I guess we could call it in football terms, running back by committee. You're going to see a lot of goalie by committee this year. You're going to see a lot of rest, a lot of backups starting in on other back-to-back nights. You're going to see that. And then, like you said, there might be some diamonds in the rough. Michael Hutchinson last year for the Avalanche, he emerged as the third goalie in the playoffs when both Grubauer and Francouz were hurt and they were done. Right. There could be that diamond in the rough, just absolutely just waiting in your system, that now, because of you're allowed to carry the 3 goalies, it might actually end up benefiting you and you might not even know it. I mean, but it also could hurt as well, because some minor league systems are playing, some are not. It just depends on how ready those guys are and what exactly they're doing when they're on the taxi squad. I imagine they're all running practices. I can't imagine anybody just sitting around right now in the NHL season. But
right.
Yeah, there could be an emergence of that, like you said, and it's going to be very much goalie by committee. You're going to see a lot of trading off, and you're not going to see a really Star Wars stats year for a goalie this year to win the Vezina. It's not really going to happen. It's going to just be, hey, let's do what we can to carry the team into the playoffs. And especially for injury-ridden teams, they're going to be leaning more on that rest than most other teams, because now there's 4 places to get into for a playoff spot now. So right. You don't necessarily have to get first. So it becomes kind of that type of a philosophy and strategies for teams.
Right. And if you think about it, I mean, it's go big or go home at this point because, and like you mentioned about goalie depth, if we've learned anything, I mean, my God, look at the Philadelphia Flyers. It took them that many goaltenders until they finally settled on Carter Hart. And then they just decided, okay, we need at least some depth. That's who we're going with. That's these guys. So it's going to be very strange, very interesting, but you're absolutely right. It is putting the team first. It's making those adjustments because that's what separates the men from the boys. Those are the ones that are willing to do whatever it takes. And if you actually think about it, like with the Capitals situation, Alex Ovechkin, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and a bunch of them, they got hit with COVID. And it's an unfortunate situation, but at the same time, they knew they could have done better. And that was the part that even as a captain standpoint, you have to put the team first before anything. And that's the part of, I have to learn this as a person, but I have to learn this as a leader, that if we are going to get to the promised land and win Sir Stanley, these are the sacrifices and these are the adjustments we have to make in order for us to not just be a good team, but be a better team in the long run. And that's what a lot of these teams are going to figure out through and through by the time we get to the tail end of the season. So Jeremy Case here joining me on the Spotlight Sports Network. So I want to shift to this because I think this has been some interesting news buzzes already in the last couple of days. But the Tony DeAngelo thing. Now I'm going to say this. I thought last year Tony DeAngelo had a hell of a season. I mean, he's a guy that's capable of scoring. He's a guy that, sometimes can be impactful in some ways. But after the altercations between him and Alexander Georgiev in the locker room, it's made clear that the Rangers, they're trying to do whatever it takes to get him out because it just kind of seems like there is a broken relationship in that locker room. Now, if they can't, because I'm looking at it from just both standpoints in both parties. If they cannot, let's talk about that question first. If they can't make this trade happen, what do the Rangers really have to do in order to make this work?
I mean, I really don't know what another option is for that. I mean, you got a guy who's clearly causing problems in a locker room, in more than just one way. I mean, we also kind of seen this manifest itself as well with the Patrick Laine situation in Winnipeg before he got shipped off to Columbus.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there was rumblings about how certain teammates didn't. I guess there were certain teammates that didn't want a Finnish player to be better than any of the other Finnish players in Winnipeg Jets history, which is kind of really an odd form of like racism to me. I don't understand that. It's very, very weird and very.
It's almost like baseball when it comes to an unwritten rule. Like there's an unwritten rule there that you and I are not seeing.
Yeah, it's just I don't understand that. I don't get that, but I don't see how you could not want success for your teammates in any way, shape, or form. But thus is so, and this is the reality of it. I mean, if they can't move him, then I mean, you might see what happened with the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation in Columbus. You might just see him, be a healthy scratch night in, night out. Just as either or hit very, very limited playing time. It's really, really hard in any sport when you got a guy who's really disrupting the chemistry on the team like that. It's hard to get behind it, and the Rangers are struggling really hard because of it. And you saw that too with Pierre-Luc Dubois in Columbus before he got shipped off to Winnipeg. Columbus was struggling now that they've got him out and they've got him shipped off. They're doing just fine. They're sitting right on top of that Central Division. They're great. They're in great shape. So it's just one of those things where it's like it's as long as it festers and long as it lingers, it's going to affect your team, unfortunately. And you got guys, you got 99% of the guys in that locker room, wanting to play, wanting to do it, what's best for the team, and wanting to win and win any way they can. And then you just got that one guy who just is dragging feet for whatever reason. And it's really an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you've got that much heat in the room, and it's just kind of, you want to eliminate the cancers as much as you possibly can. I think it was kind of unfortunate with the Line A situation because it seemed like it was a teeter-totter effect. I don't understand that situation either because I'm just like, well, think about it. You sold yourself on a number 2 pick because this was right after Austin Matthews. And, a lot of people were thinking, no, Patrick Line is going to be even better. And then I see spurts of Line A being better in certain offenses. But it's unfortunate now with Winnipeg, with that whole situation. And now they got Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now you've got Line A in Columbus. And it's going to be interesting to really see how that pans out. But even so, in this particular situation, this is a cancer that just needs to go. So now let's go into this portion because D'Angelo is getting paid annually about $4.5 million, almost close to $5 million a year. And it's going to continue on until that next year. So, and I'm sure there are some teams, if you can narrow the teams down, in the back of your mind, who would be suitable to going and making a move for Tony DeAngelo? Because I know right now, it kind of seems like after the pandemic hit, there are some cap hits for some, and it kind of seems like they're money tight, and they're not sure if they can take on a contract like that. But if there are some teams that can, who are the teams that you think would be interested in picking up Tony DeAngelo?
I'm not really too sure of really teams' cap situations where it stands. I know a few are in a pretty big predicament as far as caps goes, like the Arizona Coyotes, the Ottawa Senators. They're not really in positions to really take on contracts like that. But Buffalo could use some back end help like Angelo, but I'm not so sure how much you want to trade him just up the road like that. And I'm not sure you want to show your hand like that because this is, after all, a defenseman coming off a 60-point season. Very productive, very high productive for that position. So it's really just going to come down to, like you said, what teams can take on that type of cap hit. What can they do? Can't they do? That situation is even gloomy as well with the whole pandemic and now the NHL, not necessarily sure of where their TV rights are going to go. There's big speculation on that. So it's just kind of all up in the air. But as we've seen with the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation, a deal can be done, just like that within a day or so. So it's really going to come down to, and it's, I'm not so sure that teams are going to, I don't think teams should be too quick to make a move on a guy like this. Sure. You have to remember, when there's disruption like that, it could be anywhere. It's not limited to one place. That's what Winnipeg fans need to be aware of. Pierre quit on his team.
Right.
He quit on his team. And who's to say that when he gets unhappy in Winnipeg, he's not going to do the same?
Right.
Say there's a contractual situation or anything like that.
Yeah. And you think about it. I mean, look, Columbus is just like, they're like one of those bugs that just don't seem to die. It's interesting because they always seem to come back with something new. And Columbus was the team that before they traded in getting Matt Deshaun, they got Ryan Dzingel, they had a bunch of guys that were there on contracts until Artemi Panarin. Yeah, Artemi Panarin ended up signing that big time deal. And then even without those guys, they still managed to make the damn playoffs. So it's like it's like anything could happen at this point. But to give up on your team like that, and because listen, John Tortorella is a hell of a coach. I mean, he's a hell of a coach. Yeah, he says whatever's on his mind. He doesn't care about what media says or does. But as long as the team stays competitive, and again, as long as Zach Werenski and Seth Jones are solid on defense, that's a team that's going to be very interesting to watch. But they won't be very impactful as far as depth goes in the playoffs. But there'll be a team that punches their ticket in. But
yeah, absolutely,
I'm with you on that. Definitely, teams have to really weigh it out, play the money game, because I'm sure that there are some that are out there that are feeling, okay, which contracts do we see right now that are kind of like dead contracts to us? Because if that's the case, if you're trying to get rid of that dead money, then maybe there's a 50-50, if not maybe a 60-40 deal that could happen. And then it would be beneficial. But you're absolutely right. You don't want to end up jumping onto this deal right away until you actually see what's all there written black and white. And it sounds good, as far as the sales pitch goes. So I know it's a situation that it sucks for the Rangers, but if you want to make this deal right, yeah, you got to sell them the best way possible. But then, of course, there's teams that they're overlooking this and they're thinking, okay, we just have to see what we've got. And if we can manage this, maybe we could come to some sort of a deal and give them a new change of scenery. But
without mortgaging your entire future for it, though, that's the key thing.
Exactly. Yeah, because that is the key. Because the building the future is the most important thing. I even said this about VGK, because the whole point of last season was to develop the future. And that's with Cody Glass, that's with Nick Hague, that's with Dylan Coghlan, and even for Keegan Kolsar, and eventually Dylan Ferguson. But that's all of building for the future for the next few years ahead. And yeah, you have to be able to protect your future. I mean, it's in baseball, you've got your farm system. You got to be able to protect your farm system as much as you can, because some of these kids, they'll come out and they're very impactful right away.
And another situation you're going to see that in as well is the expansion draft. We got the expansion draft this summer.
That's right.
Coming into the league. So that's also another thing that goes into protecting your future as well.
Yeah. So let me ask you about this, since you brought this up about the expansion draft, because now that we're having the Seattle Kraken, and I don't think they'll be as impactful as like when the Vegas Golden Knights first expanded. I don't think they're going to have one of those magical seasons where it happens in year one. I will be the one to say this, and I said this since that first year. I think that first year was a fluke, for one, because they rode this battle cry. Everybody connected at that point. They got a taste, but they had to figure out their identity. And I feel like, Jeremy, they found that the second Mark Stone became captain, because they want to be aggressive on offense. They want to be very efficient on defense, because that has been a problem, and they need to be better at puck passing. My God, I can't begin to tell you how many times I watch back and forth. Puck never gets through the neutral ice, and they always seem to try to do the grab and go, but then there's turnovers that happen. So with this expansion draft now for the Seattle Kraken, what are some of the ins and outs we might expect out of this? And, are they going to be one of those, those teams that, yeah, they're going to develop over the times, but could they potentially be something interesting and probably something worth watching for the next couple of years?
Well, I think a lot of teams the first time around, because it had been the first time the NHL expanded in a while.
Yeah.
They kind of learned their lesson the hard way with Vegas. They kind of got burned pretty good, and then now they kind of understand that. Oh, okay, well, now we have to really make our decisions a lot more cautiously than we had to before. So and not only that, I was kind of going through, there's all these caveats and rules of an expansion draft. One particular thing I did see that might hinder the Kraken's chance of getting pretty good players is that if a player has been injured for longer than 60 games, he's ineligible.
Yeah.
He can't be eligible to be drafted. And with all these injuries, all these long-term injuries happen to all these teams. I mean, we see the guy like Jonathan Taves in Chicago. He's out for like the whole season. So because of that, Chicago's not going to be able to dump him off. Now, a guy like Patrick Kane, I could see that happening, because those are the two biggest salary dumps they need to have on their team. They're in a cap purgatory right now, and they can't seem to get out of it.
A lot of old contracts. I mean, you had Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Duncan Keith, a bunch of these guys, and they needed to have it happen.
Yeah, and I could see like a guy like a Patrick Kane coming to Seattle snapping him up, being one of those big names, but I don't think they're going to be as abundant as they were with Vegas, just because of strictly that little caveat right there. Yeah. I mean, and not only that, a lot of teams, I think they learned their lesson the first time around with Vegas. I don't think really the GMs were kind of privy to it, because it had been, I think it had been almost 20 years since the NHL expanded. I think with the Atlanta Thrashers were the last one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think the Atlanta Thrashers were. I mean, there was a relocation with them and going back to Winnipeg. So it was kind of like a revival effect, but at the same time, they never really had a team that just expanded until Vegas happened. And I will say this, because I paid attention to hockey a couple times. I wasn't big on it, only because I had family who lived in New York. They were Rangers fans. And, I kind of learned bits and pieces of the game and didn't really follow up with it until the expansion happened. When I saw the ins and outs, and correct me if I'm wrong, but ownership is everything. Because if you got the smart owners who are invested in these teams, whether it's expanded, whether it's relocated, if they're making moves that they're not just thinking about, the building of the fan bases and keeping it strong, but they're also thinking about, we want to be competitive. We want to get more fans in the stands. We want to get all of this happening. And what I saw with Vegas all through there, I thought this was probably the most successful expanded franchise I've ever seen in my life, because guys would take all the players that they got from the expansion draft, which one of them, I couldn't believe Pittsburgh up and out got rid of Fleury. And I said
that was a surprise.
They were going to ripple because of it. And now they're trying to get this to work with Tristan Jarry. But with all those players that they inquired, they still managed to make moves. And it was funny because they get all these players, but they weren't quite done yet. They were like, no, we're going to work trade after trade after trade because we want to establish our system. We want to establish our minor league system for the most part, because that's where Cody Glass, Reed Duke, and a lot of these guys come into play. And they want to build that more for the potentiality. We don't want to just become competitive for the first 3 years. No, we want to be competitive for 7, and that's the kind of the whole idea. And a lot of people kind of got this. They kind of got this mixed up. Nobody expected Vegas to be in the Cup in 1 year. Nobody. But they were willing to make the playoffs in 5 years. Cup in 3. I kind of reiterated, I think, could they potentially make the Cup in 3 times within the 5 years? That would be very interesting, but still be competitive and maybe pushing for a 7-year playoff appearance until maybe they have to take a step back because of cap reasons, because of other reasons as well. So I mean, I look at Seattle. You're in a brand new city. I'm not sure how weather is going to really impact there because it's very moist. It rains a lot. And I think this is kind of interesting because they're usually a basketball and football town. So you think this might be successful for Seattle moving forward?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I live in Seattle, so I see it every day.
Mm-hmm.
This town is just as passionate about the Kraken as they are about the Seahawks. For every Seahawks sticker I see a Kraken shirt, a Kraken face mask, a Kraken beanie. They are really, really serious about it, and they haven't even played a game yet. They don't even have a team. They don't even know who's going to be on their team. This town, I'm telling you, like, the sports teams in this town are used as a marketing tool for businesses. That's right. That's how I've never seen it, because I was born and raised in Denver, and I moved up here, and like I've never seen so many sports logos all over just particular businesses. I mean, there's 2 different types of uniforms you can choose at your employment. It's either your worker's uniform or you can wear a Seahawks jersey. Those are the 2 types of employment uniforms you have up here. That's how passionate this city is about its sports. And the Kraken are no, they're not any different.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of growing hype up here for them. And to go along with what you said with, you gotta have a good team, and you gotta be competitive and draft a good team. Something that Vegas didn't have to think about was you have COVID now. Mm-hmm. And there's no fans currently allowed inside arenas, and you've sold all your season tickets out.
Yeah, no, that's tough about here. I mean, I know a couple people that are season ticket holders, and listen, I'm only 15, 20 minutes away from where T-Mobile Arena is. And I've been in that arena 13 times, and I've been to 1 playoff game there against the Kings. And I've never seen it be so empty like that. And there's just crickets. There's so much of that was happening. And again, I'll never experience this again in my life. I'm hoping I don't, because that's right. Just one you can't wrap around your head. But you're absolutely right. I mean, It's crazy though, but this is actually pretty good for a guy that lives in Seattle, sees this, experiences this, because even here, nobody was big time hockey fans until the Vegas Golden Knights happened. And now the fan base is grown so strong. And a lot of people are like, Raider Nation, they're going to take over. It's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be that easy really to take over a fan base. Because listen, you're going to get people from California on to come up out here to rep Raider Nation. But at the same time, as far as fan base wise, you can't compete with that with VGK. You can't. That is established, and that's what was born here. That's why I'm like, I'll be a Golden Knight fan till the day I die for my hometown, just because of, a lot of things and a lot of memories I've had from there. It's impossible really to change colors.
Well, there's a difference between relocation and expansion. Yep. There's a clear difference there. I mean, you're talking about basically inheriting a team and then starting a team. So, like, I expect nothing short of what you've seen in Vegas up here in Seattle. We're getting a brand new team. We're not inheriting a team from anybody, or anything or anywhere else. So, I especially those days of the Sonics and how loud we've known to see the Seahawks stadium get. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine a lackluster fan base for hockey. I just can't. I mean, you're right up here, you're near the Canadian border. It's just it was a perfect place for the NHL to expand. I really didn't even think about this. Was a city that was great for any sport to expand to that nobody really ever thinks about.
I mean, my God, I was hoping for the revival of the Supersonics, man. I mean, all of us, I thought, as basketball fans, we were
wait about 5 years. Just wait about 5 years, because there has been growing talks with David Stern. He has been making room for the budget for expansion, and he said he's been making recent rumors that they're going to expand to 2 cities, and I think those 2 cities are going to be Seattle and Vegas. I really do. I can't see the NBA not going to Vegas. Mm-hmm. And I can't see them not coming back to Seattle, because when the Supersonics left, the NBA promised them that the first sports team that they would get back would be the Supersonics, and they kind of lied about it, because now we got the Kraken, and then before the Supersonics left, they go, well, we just need a new arena. Well, now we got a new arena. Climate Pledge Arena is being renovated right now. It's being built on. It's being structured to house more fans. So I'm not going to jump ahead here, but I'd say it's pretty well going to, it's pretty well predicted that it's going to happen. I can't see it not.
Yeah, and neither can I. I mean, it's a historical franchise. I mean, watching Sean Kemp and watching Gary Payton, and even so, I mean, you had Kevin Durant at one point be a draft pick from Seattle, and I don't not ever see it not happening. That's nonsense, and that's absurd, because and we had rumor buzzes about Vegas having a expanded NBA team, and you know what? I think it would be really good for the market. And to be totally honest, I've been having arguments about that, because you look at some of the players right now in some of these teams in the NBA. I had one in particular I put on the spot, Milwaukee. The only reason Milwaukee is still a franchise, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because of Giannis.
Yep.
If Giannis did not happen, that town would just be nothing but big time cheeseheads. That's all it would be. Or you'll be diehard drinkers out there in Milwaukee watching the Brewers play every night. So that's kind of the open reality if you think about it for Wisconsin. You're either with beer or cheese. That's about it.
Well, and that's the NBA too. I mean, NBA is very much a player makes the market type sport. Where did LA need LeBron? No, not really. LA is going to be pretty highly sought after without LeBron, with or without him. But LeBron chose to go there because of the lineage and the history, and he knew that was a place that had the bread and the money to put together a super team that he'd like. And it's Los Angeles. Can you really say no to it? I don't know anybody who really would. So, I mean, it's very much, you see it with Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. He makes that franchise. You see it now in Brooklyn with KD and Kyrie, and You see it with them that those have made floundering teams turn into vibrant basketball cities.
Now, I tell you this because, I mean, with Brooklyn, I'd be sold on Durant and Harden. I'd be very sold on those two. I'm not so sure about Kyrie. I mean, there's just bits and pieces of it, but I totally get it because think about it. It took Denver years since Carmelo to even get to this point, and now having Nikola Jokic, now having Jamal Murray, which he caught my attention last year in the playoffs. I never thought I'd see that version of him, but I'm excited to see his growth and his development. But I totally agree with you. And one thing I definitely want to move on to here, Jeremy Case here on the Spotlight Sports Network. So of course I started talking about the NFL earlier, and I talked about the recent trade between Matthew Stafford going to the Rams. This was interesting to me because, for one, I'm happy for Stafford. Stafford's getting a legitimate team, and he's been looking for that for
finally,
for a long amount of years. Now, there are some bits and pieces because, one, I've been told that Stafford is talented. He's got the arm, but listen, you're coming away from a team that was low ranked on defense, low ranked on offensive line, to a team that was number one in defense last year and a better offensive line. Could we see a bigger jump in an impact for the Rams? Because I know, of course, you you got Russell Wilson in the Seahawks. And I'll be honest, the Seahawks need a lot of work on that offensive line, because the last thing I want to do is watch Russell Wilson get sacked 6 times in a game again. Like
or
that,
or him be the sole reason that a drive stays alive.
Right.
It not being the other weapons around him that he currently has. Absolutely. I mean, the Rams better make this work. Like you said earlier, they better make it work, because you've pretty much have. I mean, not that relations were great between Sean McVay and Jared Goff to begin with, because now there's growing rumors now that they've parted ways, that was the case, which I didn't even really see, and I don't think anybody else did. They kind of kept it behind closed doors pretty well. I had no idea there was any tension at all, but apparently Goff was treating McVay like a telemarketer caller and just hanging up on him every time he called him. So I don't know. It's just I would say also, though, give it some time too, though, because Stafford's coming into a new system. He's ran one system for 12 years or several, I guess. But
yeah, that's true.
He's coming into a brand new system. I mean, McVay is kind of a quarterback whisperer in that aspect. We all know the types of potentials he can have with the quarterback and what he can do with the quarterback. But it might come together towards the end of the season when it needs to, but starting out, I wouldn't expect fireworks quite right off the bat, especially since I hate to do this and keep going back to it, but we're in COVID times. There's not that they can't even have passing camps right now.
No,
you used to see.
Camps, no OTAs, nothing like that.
There's nothing. They have to do it all by Zoom calls now. And so you don't, without that physical presence of being there and physically getting those repetitions in, it's going to take longer. So it's just going to. And I just hope that Rams fans can be patient enough. It might take a couple of years before you start to really see things start to emerge in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting, because you mentioned about and for what I've said before we started the show was Los Angeles is such a money hungry type of city. That's just how the market is. I mean, the Lakers, they get LeBron says, I want Anthony Davis, and it's a match made in harmony. You have the Dodgers, who they've been in the postseason so many times. They couldn't get the job done to get into the World Series. They did it twice, but couldn't win it. And then they go and they get Mookie Betts. They sign a fat contract for him for the next, for years, and they go and win a World Series. Then you have the Chargers with Justin Herbert's case, and nobody expected Herbert to play as much as he did like that in his rookie season alone. So it's exciting for me. To me, I'm a diehard Charger fan. I'd love to see how Herbert does, even against Patrick Mahomes in the same division for the next 10 years. I think that is a matchup worth watching. But when you look at the Rams, it's like, okay, you got Aaron Donald, you got Jalen Ramsey, but do you really have the right quarterback in place? And from what I was told, that the Rams office, because of course they called out Goff. They called out Goff on the press, on the media. And from what I was told, the front offices and the general manager, Les Snead, they called Jared Goff's agent, and they knew how heavy they were in the cap. And they told him, listen, we have to make a pay cut. So either he's got to take a pay cut or something's got to happen. So he called the agent up. And as soon as they proposed on a pay cut for Jared Goff, the agent went right away and said, go kick rocks. And that was initially what ended up happening. And now they're trapped. Now they don't even have to deal with that no more. But 9 draft picks alone for the Rams that they've given away. They've given away draft picks pre-Jared Goff before they draft him in 16. And then they give away more, and then they give him out. So it's
Talk
Superstar
about mortgaging
Central.
your future.
No kidding. It's like Superstar Central, apparently, when it comes to Los Angeles.
I mean, I get it that football is a very much win now mentality type sport. It really is. I understand that. But if it's kind of like, we kind of see with the Colorado Avalanche right now. A lot of talent, a lot of depth, but you're coming up on a lot of big contracts that are going to have to get repaid again.
That's right.
And so it's like, now's your window. Here it is. Make it work. Now's the time. You've lobbied. I mean, the Avalanche are not going to have any problems because they got a ton of depth and they got a really good minor league farm system.
Yeah.
They have no issues there, but the Rams, not so much. I know we're going sport to sport here, but
we're following on the same lines from here. Yeah, because if you think about it, I mean, you're trying to protect your future as much as you can, and really the big time first round draft pick that really has been working was Aaron Donald. That's about it.
Yep.
And and what's interesting about that, because I've been talking about Goff, and it's interesting when Goff sacked less, when he's sacked once or less, he's a winning quarterback. But when he's sacked more than once, he's not the same. And you have to think about it. A guy who beat Seattle with a broken thumb, a guy who nearly kept it competitive against Green Bay, you would think, oh, there's no way they would have done this. But somewhere in between there, that's when the relationship started to break and was just like, because here's what was interesting. I heard this was it was a certain game that made the decision. It wasn't the loss against the Jets because they don't play in the same division. It wasn't the loss against Miami, not even in the same division either. But it was instead that game in their division against San Francisco, against Kyle Shanahan. Now, they didn't have Jimmy Garoppolo because he was hurt. Instead, they lost to Nick Mullins. Okay, Nick Mullins, of all people. Goff had 2 turnovers and a fumble. And he looked bad. And from what I was told on the sideline, McVay was pissed. McVay was outraged. And he automatically got on the phone and he called Stan Kroenke and he says, Stan, I need you to get Les on here right now. We need to talk about this. And he says, do you believe in me? Because at this point, this is all about McVay more than it is about Goff. And that's where I think this is the determining factor.
When you saw that throughout the entire NFC West this year, how important those division games really were. I mean, the Cardinals almost crept into the playoffs and absolutely spoiled the Rams' party and almost kicked them completely out of it.
Yep.
You see how important those interdivisional games are. That's why I have a heavy feeling. That's why McVay did what he did, and he stressed that loss so hard because it's like it literally could come down to that. Yeah, the NFC West is really tough like that. And, this year, especially with John Lynch still at the helm in San Francisco, they're going to make some more moves. They're only going to get better. John Lynch is a great GM. He really is. And they're not going to get any worse. They're going to get better. And the
Oh no,
Cardinals,
they were riddled with a lot of injuries, but they're going to get some defensive players back. Hopefully, the offensive line will be much better. But I'd like to see them. I just like to see how Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are really going to work with the offensive weapons there. But no, you're absolutely right.
and I'm not sure entirely what is going to happen with Deshaun Watson, but both, I mean, the Niners have been interested. They've put their name in the hat for being interested in Deshaun Watson, and the Cardinals are not too happy with Kyler Murray at all either. You know, there's a lot of growing sentiment around Arizona where they're not really too happy with him after year 2. So
yeah.
But
here's my takeaway though with Kyler Murray, and I've been saying this. Like I even said this in my previous episode, is it really Kyler Murray, or was it the fact that when you had Josh Rosen, okay, a quarterback at a UCLA, how legit was the offensive line? That offensive line was letting so many defenders break through. And I love Kyler Murray. I love the fact he's athletic. He's got a great throwing arm, and he's a guy that you could utilize on all sorts of situations on the field. But again, it comes back to the owner, the general manager, the coach, the quarterback, and the offensive line. And it seems like Arizona, they have the pieces that they need to, except for offensive line. I've been saying that if you want Kyler Murray to be a better quarterback, get a healthy offensive line to protect him because he's your franchise. And that's what a lot of these other teams are doing. When they find a specialty quarterback, you do the one thing you're supposed to. Protect him at all costs. And even if you have him or you had Josh Rosen, it still didn't solve your problems. You know, and that's what I think is kind of being the real truth and reality with Arizona.
I mean, yeah, and obviously DeAndre Hopkins helps, you know, but he doesn't, you don't want a situation like a Russell Wilson in Seattle. You don't want your quarterback. Man, I can't tell you how many times I've watched Seattle games this year and just absolutely like start to cringe and every time, you know, you just don't want that. And, you know, but you know, like I was saying as well, if Deshaun Watson splash lands in the NFC West, boy, does that ever get interesting.
Oh boy, I just feel like that's just a kick in the tires to the Rams at that point, because McVay's trying to make this thing work, and oh no, here comes Kyle Shanahan, an offensive-minded genius as he is, and he's just going to bring the best out of Deshaun Watson, and it's just going to be another kick and blow to the tires for them.
Yeah, it's going to be, you know, Wilson, Stafford, Watson. I mean, and then all of a sudden the NFC West becomes the division in football now.
My God.
Pretty much.
And I even mentioned this, you know, even when I started talking about Carson Wentz, because looking at the AFC West, because it's clear you're going to have Mahomes, Herbert, Carr, and Drew Lock, and nobody is sold on Lock. I'm not sold on Lock. I just felt like he was a kid that it almost seemed like a reach to me when he came out of Missouri, and you know, it reminded me of so many of these quarterbacks that got drafted, and I'm just like, John Elway, you were a quarterback. You would think you'd figure this problem out. You'd be finding the dynamic quarterback that really fits the bill for Denver. But even so, when you look at the Denver Broncos, I love their talent. I love how they have things set up, but they just can't seem to get the quarterback right. Do they potentially go for a trade, or is this kind of something that you rinse and repeat and go for the draft again?
I don't know. I was kind of hoping for them to make a move with either Stafford going now or you know, somebody like a Deshaun Watson, but it just doesn't seem like they're doing any of that. I don't know exactly. And then what John has up his sleeve, well, now new GM George Payton, now what he has up his sleeve, I'm not entirely sure. There's a lot of uncertainty in Denver right now with the ownership. There's a new GM coming in. There's just it's hard to even tell what's up from down. It really is right now. And I mean, you've got a great young wide receiving core. You know, you got great running backs. You got a really, really decent defense. I don't know how decent it's going to be next year because, you know, Jarrell Casey got hurt, and you know, Shelby Harris is due to get paid again, and
Von Miller trying to come back from injury. Yep.
Von Miller in the situation that he's potentially got. Justin Simmons needs to get repaid again. You got a lot of issues there. as far as what to figure out to do with money and talent and players. So it's just I don't know, man. Denver is one of those teams that is just so hard to tell right now. I honestly, I don't think Drew Lock is it. And what's even more frustrating is to know that John Elway liked Josh Allen and how close he was to pulling the trigger on Josh Allen, and he just didn't did it. He just didn't do it because he got so traumatized with Paxton Lynch and picking a good sizable quarterback that he was just so gun shy to pull the trigger on Josh Allen. And that is what hurts the most more than anything, to see the success that Josh Allen has and know that, he was playing in Wyoming. He was right up the road from Denver. John went and visited him like 3 times. It showed genuine interest in him, and then draft day just didn't do it. And it was just, that's frustrating.
Yeah, that's absolutely frustrating for sure. And I'm not sure how Denver's going to do. But you're absolutely right. Denver's so unpredictable. I mean, think about it. We just had the biggest trade in baseball with Nolan Arenado going from the Rockies to St. Louis. But I've been saying this about Colorado. Colorado had such a great lineup with him, Trevor Story, David Dahl, and Charlie Blackmon. But they could never
DJ LeMahieu.
Yeah. But they can never figure their pitching out. And pitching has been an absolute issue with them, because sometimes, perfect example, you look at the Angels, you can have all the offense in the world, but if you don't have pitching, if you're not solid like how the A's or, the Astros or even some of these big times, even the Nationals at times, if you don't have the powerhousing of the pitching, length really shortens. You're now on the shortened end of the stick because that's all you got. You don't have anybody else that's willing to pitch quality innings, throw for strikes, and get you out and get you out of situations nowadays.
Well, and the Rockies have had trouble with pitching ever since that franchise was born. Really. Yeah. I mean, it's been 27 struggling years of not having pitching, and it's just because of the simple fact is this: nobody wants to pitch at altitude. Nobody wants to do it. None of the big names want to come into Coors Field and get knocked around the yard, half the season, and try to have to figure it out and then readjust at sea level and then readjust at altitude. I know they brought in the humidor, but it really didn't help things as much as the Rockies thought it would. That's just been my thing with the Rockies, is like they're as long as nobody wants to come and pitch for them, I'm sorry to say it, but they're just not going to be much of anything. The pitching is everything. It's like goaltending is in hockey. You don't got a good goaltender, you're not going anywhere. It's that simple. And now just to see this absolute carelessness with the Nolan Arenado trade is infuriating, because they ship him and then they ship $50 million with him and don't get anything in return.
It's like it was just like, here, you can have him for free.
Right. And then we'll give you more money too. We'll give you more money. And I was like, what? This is
what they could have done with that $50 million. Could you imagine where that could have gone?
It's so mind-boggling. It's beyond anything I could ever fathom. And I know I'm just a fan. I know I'm not a baseball GM. I mean, quite honestly, I was a Rockies fan. I grew up in Denver, but 2017 I ditched them. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And it clearly continues to show itself year in and year out. I mean, the Cardinals, the Rockies have been a farm system for the Cardinals forever. We traded away Matt Holliday, we traded away Larry Walker, we traded away Dexter Fowler, we traded away Preston Wilson, we traded away Daryl Kyle. We traded so many great key players that were
with that 1-year wonder he had when he was a big time pitcher.
It's like we've traded away cornerstone players of the entire franchise for the Colorado Rockies, and it's just, to the Cardinals, it's so frustrating. I'm so glad. It's like, whenever you when you're in your relationship and you could tell that your girlfriend's got some problems, and you're like, you know what, I'm kind of done with this. And then maybe 5 years later, you kind of see her and you see that she's even having worse problems. You're like, I thought you were supposed to get better when we detached. I didn't think you were supposed to get any worse. And that's what the Rockies have. I detached from them in 2017, and I look at them now and I'm just like, I thought you guys were supposed to get better and just prove me wrong and make me feel stupid forever turning my back on my hometown franchise, but they just I don't get it. I don't get it. It seems like the Munsons, like they care about their beef industry more than they care about making money off that party deck up in right field than they care about putting a winning product on the field. They don't, I mean, because they know they're going to get 3 million people a season in that Coors Field no matter what, and they're going to make money, and they're going to make their money, but it's just like eventually that's going to wear out.
Yep.
Fans want to see a winning team.
Oh yeah, they do. They want to see a winning team more than anything. And here's the other thing, because that always comes to everyday life, whether it comes to business. Risk always equals reward. Even if you take some of those big time risks, think about the reward that comes after it. Because when you make that happen, and I mean, you look at some of these Fortune 500 companies, I mean, Tesla, Amazon, they made big time risks into building something to where now, my God, Elon Musk is the most successful businessman on the planet. And then you have a bunch of all these other up and coming business people that they're making the same similar moves. And it shows that when you put an idea together and you make the risk in it, in putting the potentials in it, and you invest in it, that's where the real reward comes into it in the end. Now, even if it fails, you look back at it and I'm like, okay, that was a dumb
tried.
Mistake. Yeah, you tried and you learned from it. But that's something that people got to start to realize. And these franchises, they haven't learned that yet.
I hate to say this, because I know there's a lot of Rockies fans in Colorado, and even particularly around the world now that there's been almost 30 years of baseball in Denver. But I honestly feel like the best thing for that team to do is just to get sold and move out of Denver, because it's clear to me that they're the franchise that no pitcher wants. If they can't get pitching there, I don't think they're ever going to win a World Series. 07 looks like such a fluke.
Yeah.
Like, 07 was such a fluke. Like, it was just the stars aligned perfectly. And honestly, if the Cleveland Indians would have won and we would have faced them in the World Series, you probably would have had a way better shot at winning that World Series than you did going up against the Boston Red Sox.
That's true.
Year. It just, that franchise is so frustrating. I am so glad I'm not a Rockies fan anymore, because I can only imagine how Rockies fans are reacting yesterday, today. It's got to be so infuriating to watch one of the greatest third baseman potentially of all time just walk, and then the franchise goes, here's some more money with it, and we don't want anything. You can just have him.
Right. And think about this. What are you going to end up doing now once Arenado's gone? Are you now going to see more of the potentiality with Trevor Story now have to build up? Are you going to expect Ryan McMahon to now have to be, a productive player? Like, it just doesn't seem like, those puzzles are adding up at all for Colorado. And it's unfortunate.
And Story is like Arenado too. He's a competitive player. He wants to be on a winning team. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his days floundering away with the sub 500 franchise who can't seem to just get their head out of the sand.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I could think about this all the years with Colorado, these were definitely the guys down the tiers. Andres Galarraga, Vinny Castilla, Matt Holliday, Troy Tulowitzki, Carlos Gonzalez, Nolan Arenado, and now you have Trevor Story. And listen, I'm not even going to add Charlie Blackmon into this mix. I think he's a wild card guy. He's a guy that you could probably throw into the mix as just an add-on, but I don't see him being as impactful as far as a franchise goes. But I feel like that's kind of just sums it up with that franchise, with all those players listed right there.
It's a shame that none of those players are enshrined. The only player they've ever enshrined is Todd Helton.
Yeah,
that's it. Like Larry Walker, Vinny Castilla, Andres Galarraga, Dante Bichette, all those guys should be enshrined in that stadium, because that's what made that team competitive from the get-go.
Yeah, it's true.
Ellis Burks, Eric Young, all those guys all those guys are what made Colorado baseball a thing.
Yeah.
And to see that there's only one man who's enshrined, who, by the way, is not even a Hall of Famer, and the one guy that you don't have enshrined is a Hall of Famer now, and Larry Walker.
Yeah.
That is very, very, very frustrating. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I maybe it's because they thought, well, we're too young of a franchise to start enshrining players. We don't have that legacy. I don't know what it is, but man, when I was a young kid growing up in Denver, those were the glory days. I mean, there was nothing better than steroid era baseball with thin air.
Man,
I tell you what, I went to the 1997 Home Run Derby. Who, Lord, was that ever a sight and a spectacle to see when it came to Colorado?
Isn't that breathtaking right there? I mean, my God. I mean, but baseball stories I've had, like I grew up playing and watching baseball all throughout my life. I remember at 6 years old, I went to my first ever baseball game, and it was at old Yankee Stadium, and they were playing the A's. And of course, right here behind me, of course, I have boxed up. I mean, it's a must. A guy who's been loyal to a team for 20 years, and he was one of my favorite icons as a player, not only just from his play game, but just his leadership and what he was to the team. He was lived and breathed New York. And so I get a chance to see the game. Fast forward to 2013. When I was 13 years old, I go to Cooperstown. I go and see the Baseball Hall of Fame. And in the end, I take a drive up over to the Bronx, and we go and do the baseball tours where I got a chance to walk on old Yankee Stadium. And I'm right there behind the plate where you just see the whole field, even all the way toward the outfield, and you have no choice but to sink in just all the legendary players who played on this field all the way through and through. And it's just like, it's an unbelievable, breathtaking moment, man. I mean, yeah, it's surreal.
Yeah, that's an even more deep lineage in history than the Rockies will probably ever have. I mean, you got guys like Roger Maris and Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, and just the list goes on and on and on. And Reggie Jackson, there's so many people who played on that field who are just absolute legends in baseball, and everybody from Roger Clemens, Mike Mussina, all those guys that made the Yankees, Mariano Rivera, I can only imagine what that's like. That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, man. It like I said, I mean, those are just the roots itself, man, that started itself, the place that Ruth built, and that's what carried all the way on from generations moving forward until now. You got the baby boomers who, they're trying to figure themselves out. But, overall, man, I mean, this was really, really good, man. I had a great time talking with you, man. You obviously know a lot about your sports, man, and especially even in the hockey world. I mean, it's exciting to know that because, I mean, I watch Hot Take Hockey almost at any time. He's a fun guy. Big time YouTuber, got a lot of really good content. He looks to be like he's got to be a Leafs guy. He has to be. I mean, my God, if I could have just one interview with a Leafs guy to really have a reasonable opinion about the Leafs, I mean, my God, maybe we might get somewhere. But Jesus criminy, like it's like every year with the Leafs, it's like there's gonna be something happening, and then they disappoint. They disappoint.
All I gotta say is they better do everything they can to get Joe Thornton a cup.
Oh God,
that man deserves a cup.
That man deserves a cup. I mean, my God, Patrick Marleau was another guy that, especially with as big of a scorer as he was, that's another guy that's a big time leadership role. But yeah, if they don't get this right and again, 65 games, it's a shortened season. And this will probably be my last topic about this, but when you look at some of these teams, and I watched, I couldn't even believe how many moves Ottawa made. I couldn't even believe it, and I'm like thinking, where the hell did all this money come from? And they're making trade after trade and signing after signing, and it's like they are reviving. They're rebuilding somehow, but it's happening. I mean, you think about the proposal of the new arenas and all this other stuff, and it's
Yeah.
just like it's happening. But who are some teams that you think, even with as tough as a season it is, that remain strong, the battle through this, possibly could make some noise in the playoffs? Even just a couple teams that you can think of in the back of your head, and maybe some that might get the tires blown off from here.
Well, I mean, obviously, out in the West, it's Vegas, Colorado, St. Louis.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of where it starts and where it ends, really. Um, out east, Philadelphia, man, they look really absolutely solid this year.
My question with them is, can Claude Giroux get back to himself? My God, it seemed like he disappeared all last season.
And I think he's only had like 2 goals this year.
Yeah,
Like where
and nothing against him, but you're allowing guys most of the time, Sean Couturier, Travis Konechny, these guys score, Jacob Rachik or even James Van Riemsdyk to be scoring more times. Like, come on, Claude. Like, quit being clumsy, dude.
But like you said, that solid back end along with Carter Hart, that could be the reason why the Philadelphia stays strong, but they are going to need Claude Giroux at some point to get on board and be the Claude Giroux of old days like he was. They are. But Philadelphia, I mean, Tampa Bay, obviously they only lost one guy off their team. So they pretty much have that whole entire cup team. Washington got a little bit better with Zdeno Chara with the addition of him. They lost Holtby, but they gained a good quality veteran and Chara on that back end. Boston is looking absolutely well. They look like they're like Zdeno who we lost what?
It's interesting because I even talked to the good friend of mine, Bobby. He you can look him up on YouTube as well. He's known as Butcher Block and Patriots Talk, but he talks everything Boston, including the Bruins. I talked with him with basically Gloves Off podcast, and he mentioned, because without Zdeno Chara, the question is, even if they do look good right now, imagine what they could look like in the next 3 years. Because you're talking about the development, you're looking at Charlie McAvoy now, who has to be the catalyst for defense. And you look at some of these up-and-coming defensemen.
Pasternak.
Yeah. I mean, you got Pasternak, Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, even Charlie Coyle, and a couple of other, even Jake DeBrusk. They have to make this thing work. But for the defensive side of things, because they always leaned on Zdeno Chara to be that veteran guy, I'm kind of curious to see how the next 3 years will be for Boston. I'm not saying they're not going to be as competitive, but I don't think, as far as length and longevity, as far as the playoffs go, that they could be a team that makes noise like they did in the last couple of seasons.
Absolutely, yeah. And last year you saw with the pause, it affected a lot of teams. Boston had it going before the pause.
Yep.
And then we paused, and it just, and then Chara with him opting out, or I'm sorry, Tuukka Rask opting out because of his family thing, and it just got kind of really gray and gloomy right there for a minute. Yeah. But I would also say never count out the Blue Jackets, especially now with Line A and getting Roslovic in there. Mm-hmm. Man, that adds some really good forwards and to your lineup there. So
Alex Texier, I mean, he's an upcoming player that he's going to be interesting, man.
Absolutely. Those are just kind of the teams I see. I mean, I don't know how sustainable this run is that Montreal's on right now. I mean, Carey Price, it just seemed like hot and cold so much over the years. I don't know. I mean, they got a lot of talent. They got Toffoli, they got Perry on that back line, they got Suzuki.
Of the Josh Anderson trade, that because the way Josh Anderson's playing right now, that was kind of a steal for them. And regardless, because it fit the bill with Max Domi, but that I thought was very interesting for Montreal.
And Nick Suzuki too. Nick Suzuki has turned out to be quite the get for them as well. He's been pumping out some really good production really early on. So, they got They got Gallagher and those guys there too. I mean, I don't know how sustainable it is. And then, there's always obviously the Leafs, like we just had mentioned, they got Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and Joe Thornton's out.
Yep.
And Thornton's out now because he's got a fractured rib. I don't know when his return is, but I'd never count out the Leafs either.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to say Edmonton, but
oh god,
I know they brought in Kyle Turris and Tyson Barrie this year, but they just done them no favors.
Edmonton is just like the Angels, man. You can have all the offense in the world, but you just can't have a defense. And listen, when it comes to Mikko Koskinen, he's just going to cost you some. Look, everybody wants to rant rave about Koskinen so bad. I'm just like, when and where? Because
why?
Why? Like, listen, Koskinen's a good kid. I think he's got some potential in him, but he's not elite. You can't put him in the category of Vasilevsky or, a Marc-Andre Fleury or, my God, Tuukka Rask. You can't put him in that category, let alone even the up-and-coming rising stars with Carter Hart and Jordan Bennington. You can't, and that's where Edmonton really has to figure that out because, I mean, think about it. The Taylor Hall trade of all things, they made that happen. Then they had a couple of other whiffs. It's like this franchise, man. They get so close and then they panic. And then
I thought things were going to turn around for them when they're bringing in Kyle Turris and Tyson Barrie, two solid defensemen. You bring them in to help out with that back end to give Draisaitl and McDavid some support and Nugent Hopkins some support. And I don't know where they've been. I don't
that they re-signed Tyler Ennis, but I thought it was unfortunate when they let go of Andreas Athanasiou because now they lost speed. They lost speed that could keep up with McDavid's feet, and it's just kind of become irrelevant for them. It's like
a team without an identity.
Yeah, and really. You have Mike Trout of hockey right now. And you're not doing whatever it takes to get, to win him a Stanley Cup. And worst of all, you get upset by Chicago of all teams. You get
look at Chicago now. Bottom dwelling in the Central Division is just like you got eliminated by that.
That's where I told people. I said, listen, pump the brakes on Edmonton. Timeout. Unless they wow me with something, they're still gonna show their irrelevancy. So it's only a matter of time.
Absolutely. I wouldn't completely discount Florida either. They got a really good young team. They're doing some pretty good things there.
That's interesting. To be honest, because I mean, they signed that big pack with Sergei Bobrovsky. And they need to bounce back out of him. Now, I wasn't going to say the first year was going to be amazing because usually it's always a systematic thing. It's a structure. It has to work at least, by year 2, year 3. But you think about it, Alexander Barkov. I was very shocked that they let go of Matt Hoffman, because you think of Hoffman and for how long it took until he got a contract. This is a guy that's solid. I mean, he's giving you close to 30 goals a year. And he's a guy that, can generate offense when you really need it. He's aggressive. And I thought St. Louis got a steal out of him for offense because especially with the length that Vladimir Tarasenko is going to be out for. But they didn't hurt. They didn't hurt for that much because you think about it. They lose Pietrangelo to Vegas, but they upgraded with Torrey Krug. That's where I'm like, that's stability when I see it. Here's an interesting question from Ricky 7. What about the Isles? Will they turn it around? I will say this. The best move they ever made was JG Padgett. That was the best move they've ever made to stabilizing that offense.
Yeah, I mean the Isles are I don't even know what it's like. 1 minute you see greatness out of them and then the next minute they're hurting their goalie in practice and you're just like, what's going on with this team? I mean, if Trotz can keep them, if Trotz can be Trotz and really be a leader of men,
Yeah.
we can see what happens when that happens.
Yeah.
Isles made a little bit of noise last year. So
Yeah.
Trotz is one of those guys. He knows how to get the most out of his players.
I mean, you think about it, you look at some of the head coaches in the NFL, you look at Andy Reid, you look at Bill Belichick and Sean McVay and so many of these other guys that are very impactful. Barry Trotz has been very impactful since Washington. He just find ways to win. Now, it is unfortunate for the Isles because, one, they lost Johnny Boychuk to an unfortunate injury. You got your goaltender that he's hurt, but they still somehow, some way, with the guys they have, Anders Lee, Matthew Barzal, Brock Nelson, even Josh Bailey, they still find ways somehow to win games. And now they did lose a bit, they did lose a big part of their defensive factor in Devin Taves, but they're a team that doesn't go away that easily. They find ways in any way they can.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't count them out either. So those are kind of just my teams. I honestly, and then like I said, I'm not so sure with that hefty schedule that Dallas has on them now, that down the road, I don't think it's going to be by much, but they might not even make the postseason.
Yeah,
I just can't see that grinding of a schedule, and they don't even have Tyler Seguin back. And these last few games, they got a real slap in the face reality check by the Carolina Hurricanes. They really got smacked in the face real good 2 games in a row. So
and think about that. A team that displayed so much defense last year with Miro Heiskanen, and it's like now it's just like it's kind of disassembled and dissected, and that's kind of what's been happening with the Stars. And even so, I mean, the Stars have been a middle of the pack type of team, but the question is, are they going to make noise, or are they just pretty much going to stay in their place and be short of the playoffs?
Yeah, or is that grinding COVID schedule gonna get to them? Gonna grind it's gonna rear its ugly head and grind them out.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Well, I really do appreciate it, Jeremy, man. It's great having you up on here, man. Love to have you up on here again. Let our fans know, of course, where can they find you at as far as media goes? If you got something up in place, man, we really would love to check you out, get at least a little bit more info out of you, and definitely help subscribe, help one another.
Yeah, absolutely. So every Tuesday and Thursday we do the Central Ice podcast. That's the podcast I have with me and my co-host Arian. That's through Baseline Times. You can find us at Central Ice Podcast on Instagram, at Central Ice Cast on Twitter. We talk hockey, NHL, everything and around. We just had our first interview with a former NWHL veteran, Sarah Alquist Snyder. That's going to be dropping this Thursday because we recognize that there is a strong growing movement for women's hockey now to come to the forefront in hockey, and we're doing all we can to showcase that and give that its platform and its time right now, because that's really what's starting to happen within hockey, and I'm very, very proud of that. Very glad now that there is a league where women can be paid, and there's a professional league for the women to go. The Olympics are no longer just the end all be all for women in hockey, and now there's definitely somewhere that all the young girls in hockey can look up to, and they have something to watch.
Boy, isn't that just remarkable? And you know what? I'm all about pro innovation, and I say about this even for what our country's going through. I'm all about innovation and keeping a status quo. When you look at sports and how innovative it has become, the fact that now that we're having women's hockey become professionally, I think this is great because, we watched all the women that were out there in the Olympics. I mean, with, Kendall Coyne and so many others that are down the list. I can name at least a few of them, and it just keeps going on. But having a professional league now, this brings the utmost respect to professional women out there in hockey, and even so are positive role models for futures out there, and I congratulate them And I hope that the season pans out so well for them. But this is great. This is great stuff for them. And I hope that this pans out very, like, I think this is fantastic. So I hope it pans out well. So, but awesome. And by any chance, just as a serious question, are you part of a network with anybody?
Yeah, I'm with through Baseline Times. That's where we go through is Baseline Times. You can check us out at baselinetimes.com. We have coverage right now of NBA, college basketball, college football, and then hockey. We just started bringing the hockey coverage to them. So, we're kind of getting on board and kind of getting it going.
There you go, man. All righty, man. That's awesome. Well, like I said, best of luck to you guys as well. I mean, I've been telling this, and it's so funny that you got a co-host with you named Darian, because one of my colleagues up here, the main colleague here on this Spotlight Sports Network, is named Darian. And we've started this thing since, he started a while back in 2016. And of course, when the pandemic hit, it was hard. It was tough. We were trying to find contents left and right. We were trying to make it consistent, and it was tough. But this platform here, because I've been a part of it since February of 2020, and I've loved it ever since. And just to be at least another catalyst here on the network and growing it and thriving it. I mean, we're close to literally getting to at least 1,000 subscribers, and I'm already at the 320 mark. But we work hard every single day. When you put your heart and soul into it, that's, as we mentioned, risk equals reward. You put in,
and there's room for everybody to eat. There's room for everybody to eat.
Exactly. The table never goes empty. The table never goes empty. The plates never go empty. It's open buffet all around. Everybody's going to get hungry with something, but I really do enjoy this, man. I really did. Would definitely love to do this again sometime, man, but we'll see exactly how the rest of this hockey season goes. And good luck to you, and good luck to you guys up over on the networks, man. Best of luck to you guys. And we'll hopefully definitely catch you up sometime soon.
Thank you. And same to you guys as well. All much success wished to you guys. And yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man. Take care of yourself. Be safe. Stay healthy up out there. Wash your hands. And, like I said, we're almost close to it. We're just fighting this head on, and we're going to get through this with flying colors, man. Promise you.
Absolutely. There is an end. The first pandemic in 1912 ended. This one will end as well.
There you go. Positive hopes, man. All righty. Take care of yourself, man.
Thank you. You too.
There you go. Jeremy Case there from, man, guys, that was awesome. That was actually very, very awesome. And I know it took a long time. And, I know I have one other thing, and I'll be getting to that kind of like as my bottom of the hours type of thing. But man, was that I had to go on with that one. I thought that was awesome. But he's absolutely right. A shortened season like this in hockey, it's 65 games. Nobody could predict this. Nobody. And the goaltenders, I think, are getting a big advantage for this because of the fact of you now have, you've got all the goaltenders now that are showing up. And it's also giving some of the main guys at least a little bit of time. But it'll be interesting to see how this shapes. But I think for as much of the challenges that hockey's going through, it's going to be one that's going to be fun. I'm going to love this thing. I'm going to love to see this thing pan through. But I'm hoping it's going to turn out for the better. So when I come back, I'll be talking a lot more about the Deshaun Watson potential trades and what we might actually see here coming up right here at the bottom end of the hour. You don't want to end up missing that here on the Snake Sports Talk Show.
Raider, bruh. Always a Raider, bruh. Shit simple as that. You look silver and black. Lot of bread invested in that O-line. Car insurance cost the arm and a leg to reach that goal line. It's go time.
Welcome to the My City, My Game pod show featuring Raider J77, your place for all things Raiders and all things Trailblazers. Brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Now let's go.
Alrighty, folks. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank every single one of you guys to have been coming on here tonight. What a show it was tonight. I mean, we had Jeremy Case who came on earlier, started talking a lot about hockey and some of the ins and outs. If you guys ended up missing that, that's okay. You guys can definitely go and check this out in the archives for all of our episodes, of course, from our past episodes. And of course, like, subscribe, hit the bell button, and also follow us on all social media platforms to keep you guys up to date on future shows. I'm going to have a show tomorrow night. You guys do not want to end up missing that. I'm going to have another special guest that's going to be coming on here on Spotlight on the Snake Sports Talk Show. But I really do appreciate it, guys. One thing I do want to follow up with before we go. So the Deshaun Watson thing, because now Matthew Stafford's in LA, Jared Goff is in Detroit, and now the question is, what do we do with Deshaun Watson? It's clear that Deshaun wants out. He wants out of Houston. He wants out of this mess. He wants out of this whole charade. Like it's basically over. It's over with the time in Houston. That's all it is. And Deshaun, this never happens in football. A guy who's 25 years old, dynamic, a guy that, you know, he all he needs is a healthy offensive line. He needs a strong enough coach. It needs weapons. He needs all of that. And it's unfortunate about just how things just panned out. I don't understand. And these are just kind of the things that when you look at it, it's very intriguing to me. But Houston had so many opportunities to make this thing work. They had so many opportunities of making this thing work. And again, I love Deshaun Watson. I'm a fantasy football geek, you know, and I love to draft Deshaun Watson on my league. But when you're in a dysfunctional organization like Houston and now they're trying to make this thing work, I don't know what you do from there. I really don't know what you do from there, because this is just one of those things that at any point and at any time, this is something that is just going to come back to bite you. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate all the way through, but you have to do whatever it takes to make this thing work. But I just think that the destinations, as I've said, for Deshaun Watson, I think the Jets are, I just think that's a perfect fit for me, because they got the cap space. They got a lot of those places. They got Robert Saleh. And the other thing of it is, it's a decent offensive line, still getting better. It's not all the way to its peak yet. They have draft picks. They could give away the number 2 draft pick to Houston, and then they could build upon the draft picks that they have. My sources have been telling me that they might actually get Travis Etienne from Clemson in one of their drafts. You know, and I think that would be very intriguing, and I think that would be great. So Deshaun will have a run game, and then you're going to have a defense. So however you're going to set this thing up with Deshaun, I think it would work. But then the other part, you've got San Francisco. Now it's risk over reward. It's clear Jimmy Garoppolo just, yeah, you know, it's clear that San Francisco's done with him. But I just truly think that where Deshaun Watson's going to end up going, and then there's even Miami. I mean, Miami seems like a solid place. But you know, in the meantime, I think Deshaun is going to end up going at some point after watching Stafford, after watching Goff, after watching a couple of these guys. It's going to be on the back of his mind. That's what it's going to be. In Houston, you either make this thing right or that's going to be it. And I feel like there's no way of repairing this. But I appreciate you guys coming up on here tonight. Really do appreciate it. Hope you guys have a great night. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you for another episode tomorrow night. Take care, guys. Have a great one. We'll see you later.